I've got Jonathan Weber with me today. He is a mindfulness yoga teacher and a beautiful visionary artist. He does these incredibly beautiful paintings that are very activating. And he is a wisdom teacher and an incredible human being. It's so lovely to have you here today, Jonathan.
Thank you, Schamet. Thank you for inviting me and being part of this summit. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. So my first question for you today, Jonathan, is what does leadership mean to you?
These ideas have been around in me now for some time since we've brought up these conversations. And I would like to just, if it's okay, dive right into how I can explain maybe a more healthy or wholesome view of leadership that I have, and maybe also talk a little bit about ways that I see it has been unhealthy, and link that to perhaps the ways I've looked at leadership in the past, the old paradigm way of looking at leadership and the resistance I have had to it in the past. If that's
Great.
okay with you.
Oh, absolutely. And so I'll add, to everyone that's listening, Jonathan and I have known each other for, it's been over 25 years. And so we've had lots of really dynamic, beautiful conversations that awaken consciousness within us both. And so this leadership conversation has been going on for quite some time. And so, Jonathan, it's so wonderful to have you part of this summit where we can just really dive in deeper into the conversation.
I am really thankful that you create these opportunities to bring about this discussion, and I think it's so pertinent, so necessary, and that this is really the time that we need to be looking into these deeper questions about what it means to lead and be led, and what leadership is. And so maybe I'd like to just start with a quote, because it really came to mind to me when you asked me if I might be a part of this summit. And I responded to you in the beginning with, well, I don't see myself as a leader, and I don't really think of myself as a leader. And that spurred further thought and conversation around what leadership is, and what came to mind to me when thinking about leadership was a line in the Tao Te Ching book that is highly revered throughout the world as a source of wisdom, written by Lao Tzu. And here in the 17th chapter, I'm just going to quote: "The best leaders are those the people hardly know exist. And the next best leader is a leader who is loved and praised. Next comes the one who is feared. The worst is the one that is despised. If you don't trust the people, they will become untrustworthy. The best leader uses her words sparingly. Her work is done without fanfare, so the people say, 'We did it by ourselves.'"
Wow.
And so for me, this speaks to what real leadership is, or what we might think of as a superior kind of leadership, a more enlightened leadership. That is not about trying to control people. It's not about trying to just make them do what you want them to do, or because you are so charismatic that people follow you, but rather that there's an element here that really speaks to me, how leadership is more about enabling people or ennobling people. How a real leader is not trying to stand on top and be the one leading, but rather supporting from beneath and helping people up. And I think that's a crucial difference where I see here, and why I think I was resistant to the idea of leadership in the past, because I think that old paradigm, how we might very typically view leadership, is very much about that being on top and being up front and being in the limelight and being, on stage and like, look at me, here I am, let's go this way. Instead of that kind of a, charismatic force, or even worse, one who is controlling and dominating like a tyrant, or a leader who leads through fear. Rather, somebody who we don't even really see, somebody who actually is just behind the scenes, always helping, always bringing forth, inspiring others. And perhaps that means that a leader is noticed and is recognized and is shining and is a shining example, inspiring that way. But I think that leadership, true or authentic, or a more superior form of leadership, I might think of more along these lines of having that quality of humility and compassion and the desire to serve or be of service to others, a more altruistic way of being in the world. I guess that's really what comes down to me, what leadership, real leadership, means to me, that I might follow myself.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so what I'm hearing from you, Jonathan, is that there's an old way, some people called it old paradigm, there's different names for it, but an old way of perceiving what leadership is supposed to be. And what I'm hearing from you is that your feeling is that there's different types of leaders. Would you say then that there can be quiet leaders that lead in a very strong way, but there can also be leaders that are maybe charismatic and loud that can also lead, as long as they're leading from a true place in their heart?
Indeed, I do see that is also possible. Not that a leader needs to be quiet, that a leader must be demure or somehow not shining, and that's a good point that you make. I do think that the difference here for me is that there is not that tendency towards self-grandization, to try to make oneself big and to be seeking it for the purpose of that kind of recognition towards oneself. That kind of a big ego, you might say, that I think gets in the way, and that then becomes problematic. So I think if if there is a strong character, with charisma and for whatever reason it is very large in their being and very radiant, maybe even loud, so that, I think, if it's tempered with the altruistic intention of helping others or being of service or being there for others, I think that can have a balancing effect. So I think that what's really important is that there is that motivation that would that would be a principle in a real leader, not one that is just trying to be on top. What is the motivation? That to me is really an important point that I've been looking at, teasing out of the old and maybe new way of looking at leadership for myself.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification. That really resonates with me. Because some people are very quiet and shy, and some people are very boisterous and loud. I'm one of those boisterous, loud, charismatic types. So, I wanted to really speak into that too, is that it really, what I'm hearing from you is it's about the intention and the reason. And so on that note, can you speak about the qualities of a true leader?
Maybe just looking at some of the leaders that I have actually had as inspirations in my own life, people that I have looked up to as agents of positive change in the world, and just to think on them. Maybe that's an easy way for me to think on these qualities. And then I can go into some of those qualities. Some of the people that come, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's wonderful. That was one of my next questions, actually.
Yeah, good. Then, I mean, they really tie all together here. But this question about qualities, then I think of real examples. And of course, it might come as a cliche, but one of the great leaders that I admire is Gandhi. Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, the current spiritual and political leader of Tibet, of the Tibetan people. Nelson Mandela, and even looking back, and I think a lot of these people that I look up to, they are spiritual leaders. Would be Jesus of Nazareth. I look at his life, his some of the biographies that have been written about him, not just in religion, but looking at it from a personal perspective, his life and what he did, and he was a real revolutionary, and he brought people together from all walks of life, and he sought to demolish the caste system of the time and would have people from different castes sit together, both the lowliest outcasts and the highest politicians who, at the time it would be unspeakable to be in the same room together, and let alone sit down and eat at the same table. And that's exactly what he did. And he would get people together in these ways. He walked around from village to village and had these communal meals. It was revolutionary, and it was dissolving all of the caste systems of the time, and it was very, very much challenging the status quo and the powers that be. Same with Gandhi, and we look at his life. He was creating this whole new way of resistance to oppression through nonviolence, and the way that he brought about this idea. I was looking it up just the other day. Was satyagraha. Satyagraha is it means soul force, or truth force. I think is a beautiful concept, that we would fight, not with violence, but we would stand up for, and that we would bring forth our own personal power to fight wrongdoing, or fight wickedness, or fight tyranny with this soul force. And I think this is just a beautiful idea that it's meeting, that soul force is meeting that kind of oppression or something that is hurting others or hurting people. It's meeting it with love. I wrote down a quote from Gandhi, and I found it here. My goal is friendship with the world, and I can combine the greatest love with the greatest opposition to wrong. And that to me is something that I could really get behind. I could really see that's a real leadership quality. He's not trying to be the star of the show who is leading the mob, in the front of the line and feeling empowered by it. And yes, I have millions of people behind me. Instead he was so humble, the way that he lived, the way that he demonstrated in his own life. He always thought of himself as being equal to the people that he meets and not above them. This, I think, is very important. I think it's very easy when we become feel that we are in a role of leadership, that we are in a kind of a hierarchy, like I am above, and here all of you followers are below me, and I will show you the way because of course I'm better. and that sort of separation, I think it very easily gets into a selfish way of viewing the world and viewing reality, and that kind of feeding of the ego, then I think is where a lot of leaders go astray. And I have seen this in the yoga community and the spiritual community, because that's a lot of where I do my work, and I have grown up in that field, and as a teacher of meditation and yoga practice, I'm very well aware of all of the ways in which these great spiritual leaders that people have been following and looking up to, how they have really fallen off the horse, through abuse of power, through sexual abuse, and in these ways, just people looking up to them as these really charismatic beings who are supposed to represent the truth and represent the way, and yet they become so infatuated with themselves, so in love with their own power that you see the results. So I think this is very corrosive, and that's why I think one of the qualities, I might say, that are really so important to me in looking at leadership would be humility. Maintaining that ability to feel one's that one is not above others, and rather to feel that one is always equal with the people around you, not standing on any pedestal, not putting yourself above.
Yeah.
So I would say humility is a virtue, or a trait, a quality, attribute that is very important. Then another would be altruism. How that, like I was talking about, that motivation towards helping or serving. And I see that in all these great leaders, that they are in a position of leadership because of their love for all the people around them, because that is what they truly wish to do. They wish to see the people around them thriving and becoming free, becoming empowered. The Dalai Lama, in the way that he has been of service to all the Tibetan people, and Gandhi, in the way that he has served so many of the people in India to help them find freedom and to feel empowered in being Indian. And, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, leading people to find a better way of life. And so there's that altruism. So it's not so much about oneself or benefiting from that role as being a leader. So the leadership in itself is not the goal. There is not very often not even the desire to be in a leadership role, but rather the desire to serve, the desire to help, the desire to support, to inspire, to free and form in whatever way that it's benefiting people. So that altruism and that humility, and maybe another quality I might add that I really see in great leaders would be honesty, truthfulness. That one is so dedicated to the truth that there is not room for deceit or hypocrisy, which I think is another one of these really corrosive forces, where there's ulterior motives, or there's selfish motives, or egotistical drives involved. But that honesty of being willing to be transparent, being willing to be real, and to be open, I think that is also a very powerful trait. These are some that I can think of.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. So I love that. I love that you bring Jesus into one of your leaders that you admire, because I also admire Jesus, and in that he walked among us. He was friends with everyone, the drug addicts, the prostitutes, everyone. He didn't put himself above anyone else. And so you and I share a lot. I agree with everything you just said, Jonathan. That was so wise and so beautiful. And so my next question for you is your feelings and your thoughts about power. And you did touch upon that a little bit, but I'd love to do a little deeper dive into power.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying in the beginning, how that the idea of leadership as control, or controlling, or having power over, being on top in that way, like you see in extreme cases, a tyrant, or a dictator, or somebody who everybody follows, but it's because they fear them. Or because there's there's a tight grip of control over the way people behave. That kind of a power over, that's maybe one way of thinking on power. But then the flip side would be, or another way of looking at power that I would more resonate with, was the power that comes from within, the power that comes from self-control, personal power, not power over, not power by way of controlling others, but power that is found within oneself. And I think that this is a really potent topic, what that means and how we connect with that. So what does that mean, self-control or self-restraint? I recently read a quote on this idea, and if I may just read this quote, because I pulled it up. I think this was circulating. It doesn't have an author that I know of. but if there is an author, please let me know if you're watching this. The quote goes, "You will continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that is said to you. True power is sitting back and observing everything with logic. True power is restraint. If words control you, that means everyone else can control you. Breathe and allow things to pass."
Oh my goodness, Jonathan. I just have to say that this is so potent and so powerful. And I knew that you were meant to be speaking in this summit, because this literally just happened to me this week, where something out of my control happened to me and I reacted and responded. And my husband actually said to me, "Honey, you are giving your power away to that other human being, and she does not deserve your power. You need to learn to just believe in yourself, trust yourself, know yourself, and not give your power away to someone else." And so this saying couldn't have come at a better time for me right now. And thank you for being a wisdom teacher. I agree with you 100%, because I witnessed myself and I took it back today. Today, I took that power back. And it was like a part of myself was gone when I gave it away yesterday. And as soon as I claimed it back, the power was back inside of me. There was an aligned knowing and a self-love that came back to me. So yes, please speak more into that. This is juicy. This is great.
Yeah, great. With I really love to hear the real life example of it. It is so true. I think we can all really resonate with it. That when we are in reactivity, in a way, we are giving up our power. The idea, this one sentence, true power is restraint. I think that's so powerful. And this is really so much about the kinds of things I am teaching in mindfulness and in a therapeutic approach to yoga, how we might recognize when there is a reaction or when there is a rising emotion in us. And instead of just acting out, instead of the habitual just blah, just pausing, just stopping and not going out with the anger, or not going out with the mean things or the angry ideas and spewing out things, but just pausing and making space and still letting the feelings be, letting the feelings move, like that quote was saying, breathe and allow things to pass. So we're not adding fuel to the fire that is already there. And that ability to pause is actually a strength, because everything in us is compelling us to act out. And to be able to recognize that, and instead of acting out, actually sit with it, to pause in it, to make space and still allow for all those feelings to be present, but not act out, not react. Like reacting is the acting out of those habitual patterns. So that, I think, is actually great strength. That is self-control or personal power, when you can just hold space, even in the midst of all of the intense feelings that are compelling you, asking you, screaming at you to do something now. That, I think, is really a real power. That is one thing that I can say is a kind of personal power, but also in the sense of when we face things that are difficult, or are challenging, or feel bad, the ability to face it with an open heart, or a quality of heartfulness, like softness or mildness. And this makes me think on also a quote here coming out of the yoga traditions, the Bhagavad Gita. If you want to see the heroic, look at those who can love in return for hatred. If you want to see the brave, look for those who can forgive.
Wow, that is so beautiful, Jonathan. And, it did take me a little while with the situation that I'm in, that I was able to come to a place of love. And I was able to look at the situation from like I was observing it and have this compassion and this kindness. And I thought, well, obviously this person is in a lot of pain. This person is hurting. And to, instead of coming from a reactionary place of me or I, coming from a bigger place of love. So I have personally just gone through everything you're talking about. It's really quite amazing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So what Jonathan is speaking about, I can tell you it's true.
Yeah, that ability to meet the challenges and meet the difficulties that we all face. This really is empowering when we can do that and not just shrink back or fall into a victim role or just go into a kind of apathy or passive kind of a role, but actively meeting it. And this is something that I think is really misunderstood a lot in spiritual traditions, where I'm really coming from, is there's this idea that that we're just being passive by being non-reactive, and that's a kind of a giving up of your power because you're not standing up and making a scene and being strong in resistance. But I see this is not a correct understanding of this quality that I'm speaking on here, of this restraint, because it's actually quite conscious and it's quite active. You're very consciously and actively not moving with that old habit energy, and instead choosing to stay with and let those feelings move, let those feelings be without reacting to them or acting on them, and then choosing instead to respond with that heart quality, with that ability to stay open in the heart, which usually we will just clamp down, close down, and you're my enemy now, and I'm going to push you away, and I'm going to protect myself, and that's just very typically what we do. But instead, being able to hold space, not make enemies of our challenges, not try to push it away or try to control it or try to abolish it. But rather to be sympathetic, be compassionate to it. How do we find a peaceful resolution? How do we come to an understanding? How do we resolve this in a way that's not going to create more pain and more hurt? And if we can approach our challenges in these ways, I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I love that you're not, what I'm hearing is you're not saying don't come to action. It's just don't react when you're in that heated place.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing from you, Jonathan, is you stay calm and find the connection to your heart and come from a loving place of kindness and compassion, yet still have the boundaries and the right action moving forward to reach a peaceful resolution.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I love that you brought this up and spoke into it, because it is a misconception in the spiritual world that we, to be peaceful and to be spiritual, that we're just these pushovers. And so what are some tips that you might have for someone that does meet a situation like this in going forward?
Well, this is where mindfulness practice becomes so relevant. These are tools that give us the ability to practice being more self-aware. And so really the first step in any situation where there is a difficulty arising, maybe it's perceived outside of oneself, or it's recognized as happening within. In any case, it's happening in your mind, it's happening in your field. There is something being affected, whether it's a stressor and you're feeling irritable, or you're feeling like you're affected from what other people are saying. The effect is coming in one's own being. You're experiencing it in yourself. And so just to be able to recognize that I'm feeling upset, or I'm feeling that strong emotion, or I'm feeling unwell, or I'm not feeling safe. And in those ways, just recognizing that there's something happening. And so that's like your little bell going off. That's your alarm to say, pause, don't act out. Take a moment to breathe. Take a moment just to calm the nervous system down, because your system is going into a reactive state. And so the first aid here would be to just settle back down and make some space. Because very often from that irritated place, and when we start feeling a trigger and we start feeling the reactivity starting, we get more and more narrow. We get more and more closed and confined, and pretty soon we're kind of in tunnel vision, and we're just going through the motions of that, the same kind of reactive way of being. And so if we can just stay present, that's that mindful quality. If we can pause, recognizing there is that feeling of being upset, and then be able to be present with it. And then in that space, we have the opportunity there to make some conscious choices. We have the opportunity to see, is this way that I might think to react, is that going to help the situation? Is that going to add more fuel to the fire? Is that going to exacerbate it? Is that just going to continue to make things more irritable? And in most cases, that's often what happens, is we're just feeding into it, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it kind of blows out of proportion. So I think, first of all, we just want to be able to take a pause and take a deep breath. Breathing is really one of the best tools that we have. So right now, exhale out that holding, that tightness, that tension. Just allow for some space, some softness, and notice, like, when we start to feel upset, we tend to tense up, the shoulders, or the chest, or the throat, or the things just tend to start to stiffen or tighten. And to be able to stay soft, or stay relaxed, calm in the midst of that rising tension. And in some cases, it might be best to step away from the thing that is triggering, or the situation that is triggering, to take a pause in that way, to take a step away from it, to be able to go for a walk or take a break if possible, and getting some fresh air, breathing a few deeper breaths, calming down, sitting down, lying down, maybe just giving yourself a time out. And that might be, just sit down 10 minutes or whatever you need to feel the system coming back into a more resting state, not activated. That, I think, is one of the best tips, if we can remember that in the midst of rising reactivity or feeling upset. And then, these are really things that we can learn, we can develop, we can cultivate, and that's really why I like to bring the practices of mindfulness and compassion not only into yoga practice, but into our everyday. And these are ways that it can be so helpful.
Yeah, I love that, Jonathan. Thank you so much. Those are great techniques and tips. Thank you so much. And what came to mind as we were speaking as well is this kind of, and this relates to actually what I just went through this last week as well, is this fear of stepping into our power and into what I call leadership, which, is, do we just not say anything, or do we say something? And I'm just going to speak about what happened to me, because I feel like this is going to help other people. For the longest time, for many years, I didn't want to upset the apple cart. So I would keep my mouth shut and I wouldn't speak because I didn't want the reaction. But then I stepped into my power. And since I've stepped into my power, I've been speaking up for my needs. I've been speaking up for what is right for me, what is not okay. But I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because of what might come back. And, so I did have that experience of speaking my truth, but it came back at me with daggers. It came back in a very toxic way, in a very resentful way, that now I'm at this place where, should I have just not said anything? And this, in what you were just speaking about, reaction and about aligning yourself before you respond, is it more wise to just be silent? Or is there a way to speak one's truth and be that that kind of boisterous leader that's in her power or his power, that doesn't then risk? And I think what I'm trying to ask is, how can you be empowered and wise and not have that kind of energy come back at you in that way? Because then the opposite of us being empowered and in our leadership is being a doormat and being disempowered.
There's something here I could speak to, and since I brought up Gandhi as somebody that I admire as a leader, I pulled up a quote of his, and it seems rather appropriate here, if I might read it.
Oh yes, please. Yeah, because this is what I've been going through in my mind.
Yeah.
It's this relationship to being empowered and in our power, but also there's this responsibility of not wanting to hurt anyone else.
That's right.
So that's the real morsel I want to really get to, is how do you speak up for yourself so that you're being kind and loving to self, but also not hurting someone else.
Yeah, and that can be very tricky at times, but I think, again, it will come back to motivation, and comes back to you being honest with yourself. What is your motive in speaking, and are you speaking from the heart, or are you just trying to be nice? so, if I think if you are able to be in contact with the heart, and that softness and that compassion, and really have empathy for another, knowing that most often people are saying hurtful things because they themselves are in a position of being hurt or feeling compromised, or feeling that they need to act out in their own ways because of their own pain or ignorance. And from that very narrow place, we can all sympathize with what that feels like, because we've all been there in some way, where we have acted out and hurt others because we have felt hurt, and we feel justified to hurt others. We feel justified to say mean things because well, I'm hurt. And the ability to be compassionate in those ways, and then to choose our words wisely, or to choose our words in such a way that we are aligned with the heart. And maybe I can just I can speak on that, on a way that that I remember one of my first teachers, Ram Dass. He was talking about, being he was a leader, and he came back from India, and he was part of a whole movement in the 60s and 70s, a spiritual leader, wrote the book Be Here Now, and lots of people following him because he had come back from India as a Harvard professor. Now he was a spiritual teacher, and so Baba Ram Dass and people were all thinking he had such wisdom, and were looking up to him. But then when he went back home to his family, because his father was dying, and there he was with his brother, and who was very conventional, and really in a whole nother world, and really looking down on the life of Ram Dass, and how he was living his life, and just saying all kinds of mean things to him, despising him, and critical of him, and so on. So here he was, back at home, which I think a lot of people can relate to, what it's like to kind of go back into that home space, and you're back in that old identity, that old role, and then here he has, all this negativity coming at him. And he recalls this experience as seeing arrows being shot at him, all these arrows just coming at him. And so he would visualize each of these very biting and scathing comments, and critical ways of describing his life, etc., and take each arrow and put a little heart on the tip of the arrow, turn it around, and send it back. And I thought that was a really nice image, a way of visualizing, not returning it with sharp comments, or not taking it in and feeling, oh, I'm so wounded, but rather just seeing the possibility of transforming each of those and sending in turn something that is light or healing or kind. And this is really a practice in Tibetan Buddhism. It's called Tonglen, giving and sending. And so you visualize taking in suffering or pain, you turn it around and offer the opposite, which is healing and kindness. And then I'd like to just also, if I may, read this quote that I have here. Is there time for that? It's not very long.
Definitely. Yes.
Gandhi speaking on nonviolence. Nonviolence is not a resignation from all real fighting against wickedness. On the contrary, the nonviolence of my conception is a more active and more real fighting against wickedness than retaliation, whose very nature is to increase wickedness. I contemplate a mental and therefore a moral opposition to immoralities. I seek entirely to blunt the edge of the tyrant's sword, not by putting up against it a sharper edged weapon, but by disappointing his expectation that I would be offering physical resistance. The resistance of the soul that I should offer instead would elude him. It would at first dazzle him, and at last compel recognition from him, which recognition would not humiliate him, but would uplift him.
Mm.
And in this way, I love that he speaks on how ultimately conquering his foes would be that he would inspire in them something better. That he's not seeking to be better than them or to resist them through force. And that's that quality there of not trying to control our foes, not fighting them with force, with violence, with more of the same kind, but rather to meet it with a softness, a flexibility, and adaptability, and standing in one's own power, like the Bhagavad Gita was saying in that quote I said earlier, that look at those who can love in return for hatred. And wasn't that just the same message that Jesus was saying over and over again? To love thy neighbor as thyself, and not hitting back, but offering the other cheek instead. That way of that ability to stand firm in oneself and knowing your own power in that sense. That I think is real power, that somebody's not going to take it away from you. And these kinds of stories that I have heard of some of the Tibetan monks that have been incarcerated, living years and years in jails and coming out. One in particular who told a story to the Dalai Lama, who after 14 years in a prison cell in a Chinese prison, he said to the Dalai Lama, I was afraid. And the Dalai Lama said, I can understand that you would be afraid. He said, what were you afraid of? And the monk replied, I was afraid that I would lose my compassion for my captors. That ability to stay open in one's heart such that you don't become bitter, and that ability to stay strong in oneself in that sense. I've heard stories like this also of some survivors of concentration camps who, given some of the most dire, terrible, depressing conditions, who still managed to be a source of cheerfulness to the people around them. And how, to me, that is just such a source of inspiration, that even given such terrible conditions, they could still find it in themselves to try to be helpful to others, and that soul force, that ability to radiate, not just collapsing inwards. That I think is a real power, a quality that we could all look to be inspired by. And that to me is a quality of leadership that I admire. And when somebody embodies that kind of power, even in the midst of adversity, difficulty, and so on. And so that quality to not just take hatred and then be hating and kind, but in turn to offer love. And even like Buddha, who I admire, because here I am practicing mindfulness and Buddhism and many of the practices and meditations, and following in that path. Buddha said, hatred is never ended through hatred. Only through love can hatred end. This is the eternal law. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that as well. So I think there's a resounding sense of, can we turn that around, that quality that would be so negative and harmful and wishing to hurt or oppress? Can we find that inner strength that would meet it with an open heart or courageous heart?
I love that. I love that, Jonathan. And I just keep getting this, this circling back to Christ consciousness and Jesus and being nailed to the cross. And as he's lying there suffering and dying, and he was still so kind and so loving. And I don't remember exactly how the story went, but it was one of the men that had nailed him to the cross ended up finding his pathway back to, his faith and his God, and was saved by the compassion and the kindness that Jesus showed to him. And yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So
Indeed.
my next question is very deep. I love Jesus too. I love him so much and everything that he stood for, the qualities of kindness and really wanting to help, awaken love in all hearts. And yeah, so you remind me of Jesus so much. You're a beautiful, beautiful soul, and I'm so happy you're here. My next question is, if you could see how we could change this world, and it's a big one, your vision of how we can bring more of this new paradigm and this new thought leadership. And of course, you've been talking about it for the last wee while, but like in a nutshell, like what is if you were the leader, what would be your plan to create this new kind of leadership in the world, and what do you see if you could be like with a bow and an arrow and shoot that arrow towards the target of helping this world become a better place and have a better relationship with leadership and with power? What would that be? It's a big question.
That's a big question. It's a really big question. It's a great question. And it's hard to answer in a nutshell or in a short way, but I will do my best. I think I have spoken a lot about that already, like you said. I think that we need to just start from where we are, not trying to jump over the river and the mountain at the same time. Start where we are. And I think most of us, what we really need, we need to feel safe, and we need to feel some quality of peace in our lives. I think that's like a big first. And for many, that ability to feel taken care of or safe is not present. So there is a lot of conflict in the world, and a lot of people are financially insecure, so they don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. They don't know how they're going to pay the bills, and that leads to a lot of insecurity, like, how am I going to buy food? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? Not to mention people who don't have a roof over their head. And we are 8 billion people on the planet now. And we are looking at a lot of insecurity around the world, in the way of resource insecurity, lack of water, drought, or too much water, flooding. There's a lot of ways that we can all recognize a sense of insecurity. And I think first and foremost, we need to be able to feel safe, and to find that ability to find calm, or a sense of resting at ease. Because if we are not, we're going to be on survival mode. And all of the rest of the ways in which we might develop ourselves, they're not going to happen, because we're going to be caught in that, that just getting by mode. And so I think the first thing that I would seek to do, and that I would recommend for everybody, is that we each in our own way, that we can practice finding that sense of safety and security in ourselves. And I do believe it's even possible to find when things are uncertain around us. And I know that for myself, because I've lived most of my life under the poverty level. I have lived mostly voluntarily, but I know what it's also like to be in a refugee status. I know what it's like to not have the luxury of knowing where money is coming from in the next weeks, and how you will get by. And it is still possible that we might recognize the anxiety that causes, the way that we feel very insecure and vulnerable, and so finding ways to calm the nervous system down. And we can all do this. We can all calm the nervous system. We can all find a little more rest and peace, and reach out, find ways to get help, and do what we need to do to help resolve the situation, so that we can feel more external kind of support around us, reaching out to our community, reaching out to family, friends, however that we might feel that base. But the inner work starts here. The work starts with each one of us individually, that we listen to our own bodies and our own minds. And that's why the work that I do with mindfulness and compassion and that mindful yoga practice is really about learning these techniques of working with the breath, calming the nervous system down. It's not that complicated. It doesn't have to be. It's not a very complex practice, but it means that we need to be responsible for ourselves. And so if each one of us could be responsible in that way, for finding a little more calm and peace in our own system, then we might be able to start making conscious choices in the way we are in the world. We might feel that we have choice, that we can choose to respond in a more heartful way instead of reacting, for example, like I was talking about. I think that's very important, because I think the next step is that we all are consciously acting in the world to make the world a better place, in the way that we shop and use our money, in the way that we decide on our elected officials, in the ways that we are voicing or making heard our voice about the need to protect the environment, or not pollute, or not bring more toxins, etc., into play in the world. that all comes from a place of feeling at peace in oneself. And that's something that I learned from my work as an activist, that inner world peace starts with inner peace. It's a cliche, but I think it's very, very true.
That's so true. And, most of the cliches are cliches for a reason. That's what I've been finding out. I love that. I love that so much. And I do have one more question. And the question is, what does awakening the new feminine paradigm mean to you?
Yeah, that I was thinking that might be the first question.
I know.
But I guess we it would be appropriate that we touch on that a little, since that's really that is the head topic here of this summit. Well, I do think about the feminine and masculine archetypes as like I think about the yin and the yang in the Taoist traditions, as having these polarities. And the old paradigm perhaps is maybe very very much representing the masculine, the imbalanced masculine aspect, where it is very much about outer or external control or activity through force. And I think of the feminine aspect as in the ways that I was talking about earlier and explaining earlier, that feminine quality of non-reactivity, the ability to restrain, to be able to hold back instead of needing to act out forcefully, or to assert or have to be assertive, but rather more supportive or more encouraging, more empowering through holding up from below, rather than forcing down from above. So like in the Taoist tradition, the masculine is like the mountain, and the feminine is like the valley. So the valley holds all that moisture, holds the rivers and the oceans and the flowing waters, and that ability to be the ground and be the support. That to me, that receptive quality is also a power. And I don't necessarily think that like I have mentioned this before with what I've witnessed in Norway, where I live now, in the feminist movement, where it's not necessarily about the feminist quality of trying to just be equal to the masculine, that the feminine would then sort of be equal to what we see in the old paradigm now as that masculine driving force, but rather that it is the new feminine, like you have in the name, that it is a new paradigm. It's a new way of being, and a new way of approaching leadership, a new way of being in power. And in those ways, like I have talked about before, it's more connected to the heart. It's more connected to compassion, to empathy, sympathy, the altruism, which really does care for others in an honest way, not just like, I represent the people, look at me, but really I care for the people, so I will selflessly continue to work to support people, like Mother Teresa did when she was helping all the poor people in India, selflessly giving of her time and energy and work, and living in poverty amongst others. We could look at all of these great leaders who selflessly worked towards their goal, and how admirable that is, how we can look to them as leaders, because they weren't seeking to be powerful people. They weren't seeking to be influential. They were not trying to be a force to be reckoned with. They were not trying to control others, but because they were so genuinely of service, coming from their heart, helping other people, we can look to them and we want to follow them. We want to follow their example. We are inspired by the life that they live. I think that that is a kind of a feminine quality of leadership. But of course, I would like to think that leadership is in this way without gender, that we're ultimately balanced in that sense, that we could be both in our power assertive in setting boundaries and creating frames and managing and so on in ways that that could represent that sort of masculine force of control, but also balanced with that softness, that altruistic openness, selflessness, selfless care of others that comes through the genuine open-hearted quality of wanting to support and really lift up others. And I think of the qualities that come to me, that come to mind when I think of this, is the power that comes from a mother who steers her family, steers the ship of the family, not necessarily through being in control, but because she is guiding the lives of the children and supporting the family structure. And she doesn't have to be loud and charismatic, but people might know that she has power to make decisions and to lead that family structure, because of the way that she supports, because of those qualities. I think that's a beautiful feminine archetypal power. I would like to see that is recognized.
And yeah, I love that, Jonathan. And I love that picture that you had sent me. And I would love, with your permission, to be able to include that in the summit information, because it was just so activating and beautiful, of the king and queen archetype of leadership, in the sense that the man is that king, and that, the feminine, the queen, is that archetypal mother. And the mother and father are leading forward with their heart and their wisdom. And so there was so much in that picture. And so I would love for you to speak a little bit more into what you see in regards to the way of the new feminine leadership, from the archetypes of the mother and the father, the masculine and the feminine, leading forward.
Yeah.
Another big topic.
I thought we were done with the questions. Yeah, really, these are really big questions too. And maybe just to make it very simple, make it really like you say, in a nutshell. The masculine qualities that we might see as like the authority, having authority, like in the Tarot, the Hierophant, having that position of power, and balancing it out with this feminine quality, which is softer. And the masculine tends to have that quality of hardness. So hard and soft, two very opposing qualities, right? And very often we see these authority figures as being unyielding. They're decisive, and this is how it is. This is how it's going to be. No questions asked. There's no room around it. And that's hard and that's fast. Whereas the opposite of that is very open and yielding. And we tend to not see that as power. But again, like in the Taoist tradition, this is power. This is very powerful. For example, if you have an avalanche that rolls down the mountainside, big, snowbank coming down, it's so forceful, it just snaps these hundreds-old trees in half, just like twigs. But then if you look at the aftermath of the avalanche, it's all these small trees, the saplings that are really bendy, that survive. They don't go down because they can bend. They're not hard, they're soft. So there's that quality of yielding that actually is very powerful, that is very enduring. And I think that we just don't recognize it. We don't recognize that as being power. We think of the hard and the strong, like a sword, as being powerful. But there's a great story about a samurai clan that came into a village in some ancient long ago village where there was these Buddhist temples, and an abbot who was head of one of the temples at the time when these samurai came in. The monks around him said, "We all need to run because the samurai are here. They're gonna kill everybody in the village, and we need to run." And the abbot of the temple said, "Well, go ahead. I'm gonna stay here." And so everybody fled. The samurai came into the village, and they found this abbot, the last guy standing, rather sitting at the time, and the samurai reported this abbot to the general who came storming into the temple, saw this little man, the abbot, sitting there, and who he thought was just resisting, by not fleeing or running, still just sitting there, stormed up to the little abbot, who was I believe, a Zen master at the time, if I'm not mistaken, and said, "Why are you still here? Don't you know who I am? I am the one who can, with one swift swell of my sword, cut you in two," as he raised up his scimitar or sword or whatever it was that he used at the time. The abbot, in return, just looked up to him and smiled, and he said, "Don't you know who I am? I am the one who, with one swift swell of your sword, can be cut in two." And the samurai just looked at him and realized, wow, this guy has no fear. And in that moment, bowed and left. And so recognizing he was strong, he was powerful in himself for not being afraid, for being willing to be cut in two. And in that, there is power. There is a respect or a recognition. I think we've lost that ability to see yielding as a power, not passivity, but that ability to be present with, to hold space for, to support, to make room for, and to contain. So that's something that I am very curious to see as a power, or as a quality, as something that we might recognize. Like I said in the beginning, the ability to have restraint, True power is restraint, not running, not fleeing, not acting out, holding space, staying put. That I think also, that is in opposition to action, which we often see as power, but that I think is more the masculine form of power we're so used to. We're not really used to what is that ability to hold space. What is the power that can not act out? So maybe that's something. Maybe that's a quality that's could be considered a new thought paradigm or a new feminine quality, that restraint.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. That was beautiful, beautifully said. Love that. Love that additional quality too. And so, with you being one of the only men on the summit, because I'm really focusing in on women, stepping into their power and being powerful leaders on the planet. How do you feel, because what we've seen is we've had so many men be in these positions of leadership that are, in a dictatorship, really, right? And I think we were clearly defining that there's a difference between a leader and a dictator. And so we've had this history of these male dictators. And now we're, in my opinion, entering into this new feminine paradigm, which is a lot of women are holding that energy. However, it is my feeling that it's not just the women holding this energy, but it's the beautiful men like yourself also holding this energy, the sacred divine masculine, as well as the sacred divine feminine. And how the reason why I asked you to be part of this summit is because you hold that energy. So are you seeing that it's mostly women that are bringing in this new feminine paradigm? And why and where are the men that are, in my opinion, meant to be bringing in this new feminine paradigm as well?
Well, I really don't know. I would wish that that there would be a more of a recognition amongst men of the necessity for this quality. I could say that in the field with which I am working presently, in the realm of yoga, because I have my regular work as a yoga instructor, where I teach a softer approach to yoga practice. And the world of yoga has very, very much become a place for exercise and pushing oneself in the way of training, where I am seeing a real interest in what is called yin yoga, or a softer approach that embodies these qualities. So in yin yoga, instead of moving from posture to posture to posture in really strong poses, then you hold a pose for a longer period, and you work with dropping into the body in a way that is still active, but you're in a more yielding way. It's more about surrendering into the posture and letting go than pushing or forcing or trying to make happen. So it's getting out of that, I see as a kind of a very masculine paradigm of actively pushing to try to make things happen. Rather, you have to learn how to relax into the posture. You have to learn how to be with uncomfortable feelings and not try to get out of it. Just stay with it and let go in it, relax into it. That's that yielding quality, that yin, it is called yin yoga as opposed to the yang, which is considered the very active kind of yoga that most people are very familiar with these days. And so that kind of yin style is considered quite feminine, quite a feminine approach. And interestingly, I see mostly women practicing this kind of yoga. I mean, there are some men, but it has become a very female-oriented approach to yoga practice, at least in the places where I am teaching in Norway. And so I don't know, maybe it is that men see this way as being too feminine, like they really don't want to be seen as being effeminate, and would rather find ways of feeling their power in a very masculine way that they would recognize. But I think that we really ultimately need to be looking to find balance in ourselves, that we need to be balancing these energies, and that any kind of new paradigm, like a new feminine paradigm or whatnot, is not to supplant or replace, not to be the new norm, but rather to bring it in to balance out those forces that are there, to create the balance between the masculine and feminine. Ultimately, that we find that inner balance in ourselves. So it seems we have been very much tilted in the scales over to this masculine approach and this masculine way of being. I even see the feminist movement as having a very masculine approach, or has had. So can we really embody and allow these very feminine qualities, the softness, the yielding, the yin, as opposed to the yang? And so perhaps we do need to really announce that and be able to recognize that. And what is that kind of a power? And how is that powerful? And how is that useful? And be able to marry the two in that ideal of the sacred union, where one is not above the other. One is not more important than the other. It's not that we should all be, in the feminine way as opposed to the masculine, drop the masculine and just all be very feminine in the archetypes. But we are imbalanced. And so we do need to bring more awareness, like you are doing in this summit. We need to bring more awareness to what is it to be feminine in power, in leadership, to bring that forth, to inspire not just women, but men also, to recognize those sides of themselves. Because I do believe that we ultimately we need to find that in each one of us, that ability to balance these archetypes, these energies.
Yeah. And I really wholeheartedly feel that we are all within our individual, but all our relationships too, still balancing, that balance between the masculine and the feminine. And so I've seen it play out in my own life. I've seen it play out in my relationships, and still learning how to do that dance between the balance of the balance of the masculine and feminine, not just man and woman, but that energy within. So, well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for all of your time, your energy, your wisdom. I loved every moment. Is there anything else you want to say? Any pearls of wisdom? Anything at all?
Well, I guess for anybody who might be listening or have come this far and followed our conversation, just that you might seek in your own way to find your source of power, your own source of goodness, and to try in your own way to be a light in the world in that way, finding your own leadership, your own ability to lead. Maybe it's just by way of inspiring a few people around you, the people that know you, to be in touch with your own goodness and to try in your way to make this world a better place. And if each of us could do that, then I have no doubt that we will see change happen in a positive way for this planet and for our communities.
You're one of the most humble and kind men that I know, and it's such a blessing and an honor to have you part of this summit, because I know you have so much wisdom, and it's through these conversations that we're having that creates the learning and the activation for each and every one of us. The people that are watching right now, they're going to learn something that they can then apply to their lives every day. And for me, when we awaken the leadership within ourselves, then we can really start to create a new way of being. And I know that you're part of that, Jonathan. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Schamet. You are so kind. Thank you for your wonderful words and support for the work that I'm doing. And I do look forward to being able to see you in New Zealand